Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from beautiful, sunny downtown New Orleans. Finally, yes, sunny and breezy and mild. And knock on wood, we still have 3 more weeks of hurricane season, so we hope to dodge that bullet altogether. And as always, I'm joined with Rocky Messing, who's back in Tel Aviv, I believe. Is that correct?
I am.
All right. Good. Have you checked in with security at the prime minister's and everything's okay?
I did. The security officers came over and greeted me as I came in, so we're all good.
There you go. There you go. Well, we are very happy to be joined today by an old friend of both of ours. I was trying to figure out actually when I first met you, Greg, and I think it was back when you were with the 10X.
I got you beat on that one.
Yeah, I was looking at it thinking, well, that's not that far back. It's far back, but
some of those. I think I was 2006 on EDRM.
Yes, that's about when I think I met you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So our guest, in case you don't know him, is Greg Buckles, an independent consultant like myself, and also the author of an independent. I'll call it a rag, but it's not. I guess in the blog world, it's not a rag because it's digital. But if you don't know of it, you should be reading it. The eDiscovery Journal, which is a great publication that Greg puts out. So, Greg, thanks for joining us at the last minute. You're a special fill-in guest for somebody who.
It's not really a fill-in. That's not really a fill-in. I mean,
filling on the slot, not as far as personality.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So Greg and I actually go back to like 2004, I think 2003.
Okay.
He was at El Paso. When I was told that I had a meeting with El Paso, and I said, "Wait, I have to go to El Paso." And then my boss said, "No, it's like around the corner from where our office is in Houston."
Right.
So, we were all good
then. Those were indeed the bad old days where I made my bones in eDiscovery.
Well, so we always start off, Greg, with how did you get into this wacky business? I know a little bit about your deep blue background as a member of the Houston PD. Tell us how you get started in all this.
Well, and I will definitely accelerate because I've worn an awful lot of name tags over the years in different roles.
Yeah.
I came out of Rice with this lovely, naive, beautiful vision that I wanted to do crime scene. I wanted to do the full bore investigative, work my way through to a detective, but at that point my eyes were so bad that I was informed that I was not allowed to be a Class A officer. I could only be a Class B officer, which means you still put you through the academy and everything else. I volunteered, so I was doing all the crime lab work in terms of I was the clandestine lab raid team for 89 through 91, 92. I was actually the burn guy, which was a lot of fun too, because I was so young that the older folks in the crime lab went, "Yeah, you like to drive that truck out every couple of weeks and throw all the keys in the fire," which was an enormous amount of fun. But I never had intended to do computer discovery. But being the youngest hire in the crime lab, when they started coming up with kiddie porn cases and other areas where they needed to pull data off, they was just kind of like, "Well, you're young, you must know computers."
Of course.
Threw me at it. As it turned out, at that point, I did know something of computers because I had already started at that stage up an online small sideline offline online company. So I taught myself programming and done this work, but I hadn't gone through all the coursework, the certification, and the rest of it until I got thrown into it. And about 3 years in, I realized that I was not meant to be in public service. As much as I loved what I was doing, I really could not deal with some of what I consider to be the ethical conflicts and things of working for law enforcement. It got tough, and I finally put my hand up and said, "Time for me to go." At the same time, my wife had was involved in one of the first big digitized just litigation courses in Texas. So there was what they called back then the take or pay wars. And they were over these clauses on gas contracts as to
Yeah.
you have to take that, you have to take data, or you have to take gas, you got to pay for it. And there's
Right.
huge litigation ball running around South Texas with trailer loads full of documents. And she had gotten involved. She was a paralegal and got pulled into these. And I looked at it and said, oh no, we got to put that in a database. And that was what got me started.
Right.
So I
Revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
But, so I left police department and built my first on the ground company, which was
So she quit the police department, got himself a steady job.
there we go.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I needed actually real income.
Broke my heart to see
Right.
something like that.
She wanted to go to law school eventually, and she knew that I could not pay her way through on an HBD budget. It was not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I ended up going back and starting a little company called Paradox, spelled PARDOCX. I thought that was really cute back then.
Yeah.
On an old, I managed to get licensing in on the old summation. I think I was in like 2.6 or something, the pre-iBlaze. And I had
Yeah.
coding. I basically was running online coding back then. We used bulletin boards.
Oh, wait a minute. What year was this, Greg?
92.
Oh, I might have met you then, actually, because
Maybe.
I was doing a bunch of summation stuff, and I
Yeah.
knew most of the certified summation people.
I was not a certified summation person.
Oh, okay.
I was a person who bought a license and figured it out because I didn't even realize you needed to be certified.
Well, yeah, I think they were just starting it up back in those days, and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there weren't that many summation dealers around. I mean, I might have met you at that point. Yeah.
No, I was
Yeah.
dealing with it. I was my licenses and stuff I got down from a little litigation support department in Dallas. I can't even remember who it was now because that's that many years ago.
Right.
But that was what pulled me into kind of the litigation support world for
Right.
a little while. And as I was rolling along with it, I started to get requests from law departments and from corporate departments for, can you help us with this? At the same time, I went through a cycle where I decided for a little while that I wanted to learn a little more about it. And I jumped over and I took a role as a coder, basically, with one of the law firms in Houston, Arnold White and Durkee back then, run by a fabulous fellow named Orson Pate, who's still running all of the city of Houston's discovery work. And he taught me concordance and it promoted me up into being his lead tech guy in the evenings because I was doing that at night, so I was still running my own shop.
Right.
And ended up getting pulled over into, I got an offer to basically redo all the corporate legal technology for an oil and gas company right before they got acquired by Enron, or not by Enron, El Paso. So Coastal Corporation, I came in and helped them redo all this old terrible. We put in the iPro. We were on SCO Unix boxes. I think it was like version 1.3 or something. But it was mainly because we used their giant scanners in the legal department to scan everything and put it into databases. And this was like 96,
Wow.
97 in that range. And I handled their FTC second request during the acquisition. And
When you say giant scanners, how many pages per minute?
Oh gosh, those once we did the prep and the insert sheets on theirs, we were running like 100 pages a minute.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow, back
crazy
in
fast.
96?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I had
Yeah.
the first automated setup I did the scripts with Terry Tipton and Jim King for my
Right.
first. So we had
Right.
the automatic OCR setup on it. So it would
Okay.
roll through, it would dump. We had our sheets, our insert sheets marked. So I brought in contractors to do it. And we had one really fabulous paralegal who just knocked a lot of that stuff out. So we'd prep all the boxes and feed them through these, because these were the old giant Xerox imaging machines that were essentially half a room.
The upright ones?
Yeah,
The
and you
big
drop
ones?
the-
Yeah,
you
yeah,
drop
yeah,
the
yeah.
box and it just
Yeah.
went.
Yeah.
The quality was not great, but whatever, we were fast.
It was
so we
100
hand-
pages a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the FTC second request, El Paso had used a vendor to do their part of the request, and Coastal Corp had used me, and they went back and compared bills, and I guess that my single consultant bill versus the vendor bill for occupying an entire floor of the company for 2 years, I looked real good, so they came in and offered me would you like to actually create a legal technology department inside of the new company? Well, I said, and they were like, we'll give you a 6-month, trial balloon on it. You'll be reporting directly to the general counsel. We think this is a new area, and it was a brand new area for anybody. Back then, only Jim Wright at Halliburton was one of the few other corporate legal departments that I knew, that I'd been in contact with, where they were really doing it in-house, dedicated in-house. So we were, and it was Chris McKinney was doing it for Vincent and Elkins at that point. There's a couple of us, but it weren't many of us.
Yeah.
And that was the time period also that Dwayne Lights launched the original litigation support Yahoo group, and wrote me into being his second in command in terms of having to do all the approvals and the rest stuff, where we kept having to bounce all over people.
Right.
So that put me in touch with the bigger community. And right at the same time, they had just done EDRM 1, the first version. They were recruiting, and I reached out to them and said, hey, it looks like most of these are vendors or law firms who have a budget. I'm a little independent, just got hired in contract for this oil and gas company. I don't have any money. And George Socia was kind enough to be like, fine, we're gonna, can you pay a pittance out of your pocket? Was, yes. I was like, fine, I was
$5.
I think I was their first, I think I was the first corporate member on EDRM, not for the first year. I wasn't there for the model formation. I came in on the first round of projects right after that. So that's how I got sucked into all this. And in 3 weeks after I took the job, and I mainly took it because my wife was like, can we get benefits? And I was like, I need benefits. Yes, we can get benefits.
Done.
And, yeah, done. And 3 weeks later, the first of the Enron subpoenas showed up. And
so
I had
started a fun time.
Well, and I had just agreed to be the custodian of record for the company.
Oh, nice.
So it went from there through, 90. I was there 9 years before I got out from underneath of all the serial subpoenas and congressional requests and all the rest of it. But during that time period, it was fabulous because I was sitting in the corporate seat, trying desperately to get the software that could handle what we needed, and before that, no one I knew had ever produced native email. And we specifically had one attorney general, one of the guys from the AG's office, who was like, I want everything in native.
Wow.
And that threw everything into an upside down, because nobody could figure out. And unfortunately for my company, or fortunately for my company, because it kept us out of jail, I believe in, I've come from a crime lab background. So I started the whole thing with an internal investigation that turned over the proverbial closet with the backup tapes in it.
Right.
Which there's a lot more to that story, but it's not on public. But that meant that I had they had turned the journal on. There was an old Microsoft pre-journal system that wrote out the email to HTML files with links to the native attachments, and it was all on tape.
Okay.
And so I had to figure out how to turn this stuff all around, which is why I got into dealing with summation directly, working with Bill Kellerman, and working with, that was when I don't want to go too deep in that story, but we developed summations, eDocs, and email as on a trip that I just ran out to San Francisco saying, we're in the middle of reviewing all this. I know summation, so everybody's reviewing in summation, but other than putting hyperlinks into fields, there's no way right now I can attach native files.
Right.
And so I sat down with, my rep back then was Cassie Carnevale, who's probably still one of the best reps I've ever known. She was fabulous. And then they gave one of their developers to me for 24 hours straight to do this giant whiteboard BevNap sketch.
That became eDocs?
That was eDocs and email. Although they
Sweet.
did have to go out and buy a software package to do the underneath stuff.
Yeah.
So that mess was partially my fault. And we put it into place. And we were wrestling with all this just huge volumes of data, hundreds of millions of items in email. Rocky, I know you probably remember the old NICE tape system for the broker-dealer traders.
Yep.
That was fun.
Sure.
But the model the reason why I made it through that in good shape, and the reason why El Paso, in my opinion, made it through good shape, is our general counsel was a very smart lady, and she just sat down with all of us and said, we will look at our own shop. If we find things that aren't good, we will identify it, we will pull it, and we will produce it. And she was like, Greg, your job is to be our internal police department. You find them and then you turn it over, which is how I got through all that stuff, despite lots of technical issues and stuff. In a great place. It's also how I met everybody in the industry, because I was running around frantically talking to
Trying
everybody
to
in
figure
the
out
software.
everything, how to do it. Right.
How do you do it?
Right.
I mean, I built we hired Microsoft consultants, and we built the first search just for that, all that HTML email with the attachments. It was terrible. We missed like 50. No, we missed like 15 to 20% of all results.
Oh wow!
We were using IIS back in the late 90s to early 2000, to like 99 to 2000. It was garbage. And then we'd already used it to do select target sets. And I had to go back to the FBI at that point and fess up that, oh, by the way,
did we do it?
No, we missed all this. Here's the other stuff. And I was just so lucky that when I sat down, they brought in, there used to be an old consultant group named Aspen Consulting.
Yeah. What's his name was in charge of Aspen? Oh, shoot.
It'll come back in a second when I start talking. Just interrupt me.
Okay.
Anyway, I got on the hot seat with the U.S. attorney, Aspen, all the rest of the stuff, with me trying to explain to them why we hadn't given them everything they asked for the first time around. And I had to lay it out, and I had to drag in my Microsoft consultant and say, they said it would work.
So it started back then.
Well, this was the foundation for me of what I call the principles that still carry me through, which is the trust but verify thing. Yeah. I have been there when things have been messed up. I have been there when we had brand new early technology that was not meant for purpose, that was not vetted. We used it because we had to. And then I've had to turn around and explain it back to on felony charges of how does this work or how doesn't this work, and I've had to write those affidavits on congressional subpoenas and things of, three email out of 22 million on that tape were hit with a pinhole, and here's the report on it that shows and validates that those are the exact ones, and one of those actually happened to be one of the smoking guns in Enron.
Really?
Yeah. So 3 items out of 22 million off that one tape was one of the critical communications with the Enron CFO. So, it's like, and you classically, they come back to you and say, we found the Enron gave us this. Why didn't you? That's just fun.
And everyone, when you say, when you talk about how you need to have, accuracy and it's got to be valid, and, you need to actually produce everything that you're supposed to produce. And when you talk to non-lawyers, people who aren't in the industry, who are just like developers, and they're like, well, we can get 99.9% accuracy on the search or whatever. And you're like, no, I need it all, because what happens when they come back and say, why didn't this one show up? And you're like, well, it didn't come in the search, so it wasn't there. Yep. And they don't believe that ever happens. It's amazing.
I've been there. I've been there. It's been me. It's happened too. And I've had to explain it in putting on your suit, sitting in front of a magistrate or sitting in front of a U.S. attorney, sweating bullets, because and it's weird. It's why I got for a long time my email tagline was eDiscovery smoke jumper, because I got pegged as we screwed this up. Let's bring Greg in to actually explain how it got messed up, why what we did was still reasonable, in reliance upon the technology
Yep.
for what we knew and how we fixed it. And
Right.
hopefully that'll keep us out of jail.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's the other thing that a lot of people, especially on the development side, don't realize is that, like, it's not just a matter of, okay, businesses and a lot of money at stake, which is kind of important, but a lot of these cases have real criminal, jail time,
Oh, yeah.
people's lives.
It's repercussions. Yeah.
Yeah, there's reality here.
It's
Yeah.
So it's
scary
not
stuff.
just business,
It does.
but yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I got started in all that. I'm gonna skip over all the loveliness of trying to launch an eDiscovery market analyst firm and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And after this long 30+ year cycle, I'm basically back to being what I liked originally, which is the corporate focused consultant, where I get to do long-term investment with clients and build mature, functional life cycles,
Yeah.
which is why, Rocky, you and I have kept such close contact, because when you went to Microsoft, I was like, well, all of my data is within your company now, so you and I better keep talking.
We got to figure this out. Well, let's just back up for a minute to the skipped part, because I do think that, and I've heard you say this a number of times in terms of the importance of that time. We don't have to go through the details of that time, but just in terms of the importance of having that viewpoint, having the, you a lot, I'll hear you say a lot of times, I'm putting my analyst hat on now.
Yep.
Like, and I think as a skill and as a experience, for specifically in eDiscovery, it's something that's important for a lot of people to understand what that brings out, what the things within you that you don't necessarily experience if you're in a law firm, if you're even working in a corporate legal department or at a vendor. Like, the analyst way of looking at things is very different. And yeah, I mean, what do you take from that?
It goes a lot further than just the perspective on it. It is, I'm incredibly happy with the time that I got to spend and with the education I received, primarily from Barry Murphy, he was my Forrester analyst when I was still at Symantec as a product manager, running those terrible archive products. And we had this post briefing day sit down over a beer, and I told him that he was full of it, because he was authentic. He was trying to be authoritative about an industry for which he had never been a practitioner. He brought incredible perspective on the financial side and how companies interacted and the M&A activity and the long-term growth, but he didn't understand, as he put it, how the sausage was made. And I called him out. To his credit, he took a job for an eDiscovery vendor, did it for a year, called me back up when 2008 happened and the market crashed, and we had nothing to do but blog at that point,
right,
and said, you were right, I went and did it, I've seen how the sausage made, I don't want to do it anymore. It's terrible.
Right.
He says,
get me out.
But he says, now I understand what you were trying to tell me about eDiscovery being such a unique market space. And he says, and because of that, I think you and I can get together and start writing in a way that nobody else is writing in the market. And when I say nobody else is writing, I'm gonna bring that back around to the problem that every eDiscovery peer of ours faces. We are isolated. Every day we are in an adversarial system. The adversarial system makes it difficult to communicate transparently about the issues you're having. It makes it difficult to see everything. Our industry has been terrible from the very beginning about hiding pricing models, hiding capabilities. eDiscovery sales reps have made a fortune over the last 30 years because their customers have essentially been solo customers who've had no real market perspective. They don't understand what their alternatives are.
Right. And when they see an alternative, it's apples and oranges, because there's no consistency throughout the industry. So even when they see alternatives, they don't necessarily even understand
Yeah.
that it is an alternative. They
Yeah.
just see it as something, oh, that's not what I'm doing, so I can ignore that.
So you get stuck in your little silo. I know my summation. I know my relativity. I know my this. I know my this. I know these products. I know my specific type of litigation because they're very different.
Mhm.
So I deal only in mass torts and this kind of stuff. When we spun up the eDiscovery Journal / EDJ group, it was an opportunity to put a stake in the ground of agnosticism and to go out and we did it to honestly to force the providers to brief us consistently and to build a background database of real market data that allowed us to segregate out our market into all of our tiny little pieces, our collection pieces, our legal hold pieces, our processing pieces. We were able to get in there and pull that together and start generating content meant for the end consumer.
Right.
So that we got that perspective across. And the only way we could do it was Barry, God bless him, put all of us who we ended up hiring as analysts. So, Babs Deacon and Mickey Tomlinson, Jason came in, and the rest, I think at the peak, we had about 8 of us, and everybody had to go through essentially like an analyst boot camp. And you had to pick a research area, and you had to hold. The model was 75% research, and I still forced the whole company to do 25% consulting, because I said that if we're not in the trenches at least 1 week out of a month dealing with real customers who have real problems, we'll lose that perspective, and we'll end up going to that Gartner Forrester 20,000 foot perspective and stop getting our feet dirty with real cases and real problems. And so it worked really well to kind of bring us all up to speed and get that perspective. And the thing that it really mattered to me was that we developed a trust with the providers that they could sit down and not just brief us, but strangely enough, a lot of our analyst income came from the providers coming back and saying, I want to do a go-to-market day with Mickey getting hired to go do work for to consult with Xtero on their next version.
Right.
Or me being hired by Equivio to sit down and go, what's coming up next? And let's run it by Greg and see. But we were able to do that only because we wore that analyst hat, which was completely agnostic, and in which we had very clear lines of what you communicated, what you didn't, in which everything anybody told you, unless they gave you an explicit permission, was essentially covered under our wraps. We didn't sign NDAs, but everything was under non-disclosure, because otherwise we wouldn't have a business.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It was a fabulous time period to learn the industry and learn everybody's in and outs. And Tom, you'll understand that was where I got to see a lot of what was under the covers on a lot of these providers and see all the different pieces.
Yeah.
Oh, look, this isn't, you have a platform. No, underneath of that, it is cobbled together underneath of these 6 different. Oh, I got DT again, and I got this, and I got this, and I got this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
which is still the way that a lot of these platforms.
Well, I was going to say, and how much has changed since then, right?
There's a new generation, I think, that is built, purpose-built the way that it should be, with obviously, startup mode, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them are a little more cobbled together, but there's definitely a lot more than let's fake it until we make it.
It's changed a lot. I mean, when I've got under the scenes and sat down in the dev departments on some of the major platforms and stuff, that's real software. It's not just a couple of really sharp coders.
Toolkit,
who've done toolkitted everything together. It's not that way anymore. Although I will tell you, I quit taking engagements from venture capitalists to go in and assess investments, because every time I did, it always ended up melting down into a Greg says that your stuff is mostly what you purchased from somebody else.
Right.
And the VC.
But that brings up a good point, and something you just said a minute ago, that Barry didn't really understand how things worked, how the market worked. Isn't that true of most of the venture capitalists coming in these days too? Aren't we having a repeat of that paradigm?
It is, there is more data for them now.
Yes.
I've done a couple of recent calls. I don't do VC for hire expert type stuff anymore because frankly, half time it's too hard to get them to pay up unless they're actually going to move forward with the investment.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I
the
just
money's-
turn it down.
I just turn
I
it
still
down.
get 2 or 3 calls a month and
I do
just
too.
turn it
But what Tom, I found a trick. This is helpful. There are times when they have perspectives in the market that I don't have the time to run down. And so what I've done now is I'll take short defined calls on specific topics and
Okay.
not for money. What I do instead is I say, I have specific questions for you. You have specific
Yeah,
questions for
I'll
me.
do a quid pro quo. That's a
I'm gonna
great
go in
idea.
there. Yeah, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna get the benefit of your research. And it's usually not on, I'm not looking usually at the products because I know the products.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
I'm looking for is the market change. I had
trends,
one
right.
guy recently who actually explained to me why one of the changes in startup investments that I didn't realize had happened since the start of the pandemic. And he was actually able to come give me the background of why angel investors had switched what they were willing to put money into and what they weren't.
Right.
And it was pretty interesting because these are VC guys are smart. That's half the problem, Tom, you and I've had with the engagements in the past is they're so smart that they know if they get you on the phone long enough, they're going to get what they want and they're going to have to pay for it.
Right. I also think that one other change that's happened over the last couple of years, like probably the last 2-3 years, is that you now have a couple of VCs that are specifically looking in our industry, which you never had before.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's also shifted a little bit in that, you've got some specifically legal technology based VCs or PE that's ready to come in and actually understands, they may not understand fully the nuts and bolts, but overall they get it and they get how the market works. They get what the attorneys want. They get what the technology can actually do, and they can spot when, a company is basically coming in and giving them a story. Let's put it that way.
I mean,
So,
The sad part is I used to keep an eDiscovery 101 deck that was just for VCs. And I'd get the call and they're like, oh, we're interested in exploring all this kind of stuff. And I'd be like, wait, I'm going to do
let's
this
start
for you.
Right.
You're going to pay an hour of my time on my old billable rate. And I'm going to send you a deck and you're going to read through it. And then we'll do a real call because
Right.
I'm going to send you work products that you were able to leverage into your decision matrix and you will have my vocabulary. And I promise the EDRM model won't be in there. Because I know you found that already.
Right, exactly. That's the basic.
Yeah.
So-
So was they still call, but no, I like doing cases better and I like fixing stuff more.
Okay, so let's jump now to modern times.
Yeah.
So you've obviously been focused on the corporate clients and the consulting there and helping some of your clients in especially cloud adoption. So what are your overall thoughts on like where's all this going? What's going on out there right
What's
now?
it all about, Alfie?
Yeah, is this cloud thing going to ever take off? Is it real?
It's really, this isn't just another fad, is it? Like the internet?
I think the first thing I would say is that eDiscovery is once again chasing after technology development. We got that. If I go back and I look at the Teams adoption rate from Microsoft from 2018, 2018, 2019, 2020. When I look at that, and I look at the fact that the providers, I'm going to broaden this out to the providers overall are innovating around collaborative, interactive, remote work, all this stuff. They are producing changes to how decisions are made, how communication is done, how things are communicated, how contracts are finalized, remotely and all this in ways that it is eDiscovery peers everywhere pretty much to me we're chasing. We are constantly 1 to 2 steps behind where our custodians are living in their data and how their data is converting or morphing. And that's without me calling out any particular provider because, although Google and Microsoft own most of the data, I'm seeing a huge just explosion of other neat cloud-based applications that suddenly sharp managers, sharp executives are using all over the place. I mean, I go, all of a sudden there's an issue around a marketing contract, and you get in there and you find out, okay, I got Hootsuite, I got to put that together with Salesforce data, I got to interrelate it, and it's all related but not connected anymore.
Right.
And so
this gets to like what Dan Regard likes to talk about in terms of how to take the structured world and bring it all together, because I mean his belief is that it's all based on the structured, and you got to take all the unstructured and bring it in. I like to think the other way, and I think you agree, is that it's about the unstructured side is where the real meat and potatoes are, and it's about how do you match it all up though to tell the story.
yeah.
And there's more types now.
Oh God.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, not only are we getting more data, we're getting more buckets that the data is stored in, and how do you pour it all into one bucket that you can search?
Right.
For lack of a-
And especially because it's the same story but continued through those buckets, because it's not just searching it, it's putting it together into an actual narrative.
Yeah, how do you stitch the story together? I said to somebody in a webinar we were doing earlier today, well, some data scientists, I said, well, no, we can do that. I see it in the Bourne movies all the time. Now switch to the traffic camera. Now switch to the camera in the train station. Now switch to, come on, we can do that, can't we?
Sure.
There are, and the thing is I've seen some amazing startup small products that they'll latch on to like the video issues and that ability to relate back first. And so suddenly you'll have a provider who gives the ability for folks to bring all those things together and to make sense out of it. But it's not out there in the market, and it's not applying to the big cases. It's only like a really tiny little case over here. It's like the early days when we did the voice search on the phonetic voice search instead of doing the translation to text, the transcription. That was only used in very specific narrow areas. And so we're seeing that where I've got specific providers who can suddenly capture Slack and can suddenly bring in all kinds of other data from people's cell phones and other areas, but they're niche products. And what we don't have is across the board is an eDiscovery. How do we handle all this?
Right. How do we stitch it together? Yep. Very true. So, okay. So what else are you seeing from the corporate side? So obviously, cloud is a big one, and the data types and the data buckets. What other trends are you seeing today? What do you see that like you think people need to be aware of, people really need to be thinking of, especially, a lot of the people who watch this are not in the corporate world, but they kind of get it secondhand because they might be technologists, they might be people who are not meeting directly with the corporate end client. What do you want them to know from your experience?
One of the areas that
My phone number.
Right.
I think, Rocky, one of the big things that pops up a lot, and this is, I'm going to just call it the pandemic drive to remote hybrid employment.
Okay.
It has accelerated the fact that the EU and many other countries have recognized for going back 10 plus years that their digital workers are on call and online, and that their personal data and the corporate data gets commingled. Therefore, that's what all the GDPR and all the rest of it was all about, was just trying to basically give some protections for individuals. We don't have that in the US. And the drive to suddenly put laptops in people's houses and home offices across the US, starting back in February of 2020 to now, means that what we used to have is kind of that line saying, okay, personal business,
right,
completely blurred at this point. And the fact that we've moved people's digital lives to a 24/7 response model. Now, I I don't know how many, Tom, how many of the of international projects you've handled. I know you've handled a lot in the past, but how many you've handled in the last couple of years? You know, it used to be if it was an international project, they'd kind of consult you occasionally and they'd be fine. You know, when we decided to shut down the EDJ as an analyst group, and I decided to go back to being a consultant full-time, a research consultant at that point, I had an opportunity to take an engagement over in Australia that was a really interesting gig. It was a very challenging technological environment, giant, massive industrial build, and with tiny bandwidth getting in and out, but huge amounts of data on site, a massive amount of fights over bills and things about to go on, and supporting a engagement overseas, global. We are a global connected world now.
Right.
And I realized the fact that I spent 2 years on that engagement at 3 o'clock in the morning doing calls to Perth and to Darwin and, you know, back and forth all of the time. And it overlapped into my, like, forever and a day as a consultant. I've had multiple, not just machines, but also like inside of machines. Every time I got a new client, I you know, partition off a drive, keep the data there, set rules up to make sure that it's not commingled. It's becoming almost impossible for that. And we look at like corporate execs or corporate directors who are home office, especially with a lot of these startups, and we're going to end up in a lot of litigation on them as they go further down the line. I think in eDiscovery, one of the biggest areas for me is this whole ability for how can we adapt to the fact that our custodians' digital lives have become, they've so many data silos now, so many. They have so much of it. It's either commingled, or how do we collect it at that point? Because it's not commingled, and they're keeping all this. And if it is siloed out like this, what I'm finding is I go in and I talk to these execs. I did an interview with a marketing exec a little while ago, and she flipped around and showed me the screen, and she had like 125 windows open.
Wow. I mean, not surprising, but yeah.
And they were all different cloud services, and they're all different things. She had them grouped, she had them at huge displays, the whole 9 yards. She's like, well, this is how I work my way through my day. This is how I have to keep track of everything, because I have, you know, and I looked at that, and then I went back and I realized that, you know, even if I just look at my own data sources as a consultant with multiple clients, some of whom I'm their 30B6, some of whom, because of the work I've done with them in the past or present, I have administrative rights on their systems. Almost all of them have given me an email address at one point or another when a hot case happened that they wanted to make sure that it was very clear. And I'm happy with that, because I want their email to stay in their system. I don't want their email in my mailbox.
Right.
You know, but I suddenly looked up and I was like, well, how many Office 365 logins do I have? Oh my God. And I have clients who are on Google Workspace now, because a lot of the new startups are moving that direction. And then I've got personal sites. I've got stuff going all the way back to the 80s that I've got email servers that I still have running, you know, kind of ghost machines and things that I'll occasionally get mail in on. We have all, and now I've also got, you know, how many Slack channels am I on for different areas? How do we keep track of all that? There is, by the way, and I think I wrote a small piece on this, but I'd recommend it to everybody. There's a Dr. Charles Chafin wrote a book called NUMB, N-U-M-B.
Yeah.
And it's about the digital overload, and it really applies to eDiscovery and our space, and how we see things in there. And it's a good one. I'm trying to actually finagle an interview with him, because I want to talk to the man and get his input on how we can start fixing some of this. But for the eDiscovery world, we do. But for the eDiscovery world, the thing I'm finding is that as practitioners, we really have to be aware of this change and this explosion of types of data, places of data in our custodians. And I don't think that the average litigation support practitioner, manager, project manager has the time and the bandwidth with the load that I see on them to actually be trying to keep up with this stuff. It's too much.
Right. Yeah.
You know, Tom, that's why when you're writing pieces, I appreciate it, because you're finding stuff I don't have time to keep up with.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm frantically publishing out every time I find a new issue or something that I know might affect some of my clients, I'm frantically
Right, just
pushing
push
it
it.
up
Right.
because I want somebody else to see it. And then I'll get backline calls from folks saying, gosh, I just ran that test. And sure enough, I've got this on 2 of my clients, but not those of my clients. And
Right.
it's our world is evolving really fast. Discovery tends to be a couple years old when we look back at stuff. And I think that we're chasing the dog right now. We're running after it frantically down the street, trying to figure out where's it going next on it.
Right.
And I think that the only solution to that is a joint community effort instead of a solo effort. I can't keep up with everything out there. Nobody can.
Lawyers are so good at that.
Well, no, but it's very true in a number of areas. I think that there's got to be more industry efforts taking place, and not just the paid industry organizations that are, that do a good job, but it's a pay for play. You need, that's what, when we talked to Dwayne a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the impact that the Yahoo list had, and the fact that it was open to everyone, and it really created the eDiscovery community. Like before that, yeah, sure, you had legal tech, you had a couple other things, but most people didn't go back then.
Oh, I miss that. I miss the days of being able to just simply stop what I was doing, wrestling with, publish up a not client data.
Right.
No, not client data. Just publish up a question to the list and say,
Right.
all right, I'm stuck on this DII. It won't load.
What am I doing? Right.
What am I doing? And I've replaced all the text with X's. Can somebody look at my file format and tell me, oh, what do you mean? You got a hidden bad,
right. There's a space, an extra space that you missed, and you've been looking at it for too long, and you
just don't see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I do think that would be extremely valuable in the industry. The question is, the problem is that no vendor can start it. You need it to be a grassroots kind of thing again. And like you just said, nobody's got the time. I mean, everyone who I know is running around.
I had a request in from arguably a competitor not that long ago, one of the big four consulting, big four auditing firms, that asked me, would you be willing to start up, a corporate Microsoft 365 eDiscovery just chat board, so that their clients and anybody else who's an actual vetted client could come in, because I'm one of the few folks who actually has vetted lists of people going back,
right,
and followers who know that I'm not trying to make money off it. And the answer to that was, yeah, I really want to do that. And then
it's cool.
3 months later, I'm looking at it and saying, I can't do that. I don't have the bandwidth for it.
Right.
I'd hope that Ilton Arma would step in there, but I think that when these associations do it, it becomes too incestuous or too closed in. And what we need is something like the old lit support group with lots of rules and lots of moderating, so that
right.
we keep we reduce the marketing
sales
factor.
Out, exactly.
Yeah.
So Tom, unfortunately, we are coming up to time. So,
but I haven't told you.
I know. I knew that this one. I mean, we can just do this for like 2 hours instead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was like when we were talking to Dwayne. It was the same thing.
Get back up in New York in February. Okay.
There you go.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah. At the Carnegie Club.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So. Okay. So the penultimate question: Stones or Beatles?
Quick.
Oh, Beatles.
That puts the score at about 50-2 right now.
I think it's 1. I think it's 1. As I recall, we only had one person.
Tom, I'm counting you also.
Counting me, yeah. Okay, the last question is, as always, if you could spend a day with anybody from our profession who you've met, past or present, living or dead, who would that be? What would you do with them? Would not have to be work related. You could go fishing, go golfing, go sit on a beach someplace. So who would it be, and what would you do?
And this is primarily just because when they're dead, we miss them more. And for me, honestly, it would be to be able to have Jack Halpern come back down to Bon Air and dive with me again. We figured out the medical issues he's having when he was down on a dive trip with us, because two of my best friends are doctors, and that was what started his cancer fight, because Jack from the early days of the guidance VP days, and he and I loved hanging out and doing all the panels and the rest of stuff. But I would love to have a chance to just sit on the beach and hang out with Jack and listen to him laugh at the top of his lungs, because we have a number of our early folks in eDiscovery who I miss. And, everybody will have said Browning, because I loved hanging out with Browning, and he was phenomenal in the development that he did in the open exchange of ideas and hosting that, and his ability to move the conversation around was like very few human beings I know. But Jack was the one who I missed the most, because he ended up being a personal friend enough that when I was talking about diving, well, can I come? I was like, yeah, okay, come on.
There you go.
So, it was a shame when we lost him, and he and I had actually a lot of plans at the time. We were looking at what he was doing at Google and things on his, and where he was looking at wanting to take it with the industry wide. And the industry's lost a lot more than they know of when we lost him.
Yeah. I had only known him for a year or two. Had gotten to know him. I mean, I knew who he was, obviously, but I only gotten to talk to him and have some conversations. And I thought that very same thing. Wow, there was a lot left unsaid there.
Yeah, he was literally larger than life. I mean, he was just, he was a presence when he walked into the room. Yep. You felt it, and he'd look at you, and he'd just like start talking, and you were just like, wow, okay.
Well, also the big thing I loved about Jack was that his big Jack is that it was there and it was real. And when you put like the two of us on a panel together, you could tell that there were going to be some things dropped that the people who organized this probably didn't want to hear.
Right.
But but he really did lead the way in terms of, he just never held back. He had that confidence in self, and he would just tell it as it is. And he was one of my inspirations when I kind of rebranded in terms of being unfiltered. Yeah. And he was one of the actual reasons why, when I rebuilt the eDiscovery Journal, I told myself that I took the money off the table. No more ads, no more consulting work with the providers. I took all that off the table, because I said, I just want to be able to write and not have Jack in my memory calling me up and saying, hey, you soft pedaled that one.
Yeah.
You went.
That's
nice
I got to know him actually when I got to know him. We spoke on a panel. The one and only time we spoke on a panel together, and again, we both kind of hit it off, and we're making sarcastic remarks and saying stuff.
Oh yeah.
The friendship kind of continued from there. So yeah, good memory.
So
well, Greg, thanks so much for your time.
I appreciate the memory.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Yeah, of course. Well, thanks so much for your time, and always a pleasure speaking with you. I do sincerely hope we get to see each other in New York next year. I hope things will continue to improve on the COVID front, and we'll be to a space where we can get there. So I'm tentatively looking forward to it.
I'm booked already, and if I have to throw the tickets away, I'll throw the tickets away. But I'm booked. I'm going if I can, as long as it's safe. But my big thing is I miss all of our people. This industry is one where so much knowledge exchange happened every year at that and other conferences.
Yeah, I miss that face-to-face, informal, just getting together and shooting the breeze and talking. What have you heard about this? What have you heard about that? What's going on here? Yeah, that's such
that's why you started doing these.
Yeah, that's exactly why we started doing these. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for hosting these, because I think that the industry needs this kind of real perspective.
Well, thanks for participating, and again, we really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you in person. Rocky, thanks as always, and to all our listeners, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.